Trump won't bring home a dad they deported to El Salvador's so-called torture prison by mistake. Trump's Justice Department just said they want Luigi Mangione dead. The world is bracing for Trump's Liberation Day tomorrow, and why most economists are saying it will guarantee a recession. Is Cory Booker's historic overnight speech a blip or a spark? And then just a happy, nice, good news story to keep you sane. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it, starting with this. The Trump administration just admitted that it mistakenly deported a Maryland father to a Salvadoran prison, despite the fact that he was in the US legally with protected status that prohibited the government from sending him to El Salvador. And the reason? Well, in court filings, lawyers for the Trump administration said that the man was deported because of an administrative error, even though ICE was aware of his protection from removal to El Salvador. And so now the man's family is suing, but Trump's lawyers, they claim that the American courts don't have the jurisdiction to bring him back. So the man in question is Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. And according to the court records, he is a Salvadoran national who came to America back in 2011 when he was 16 years old after fleeing gang threats. And in 2019, a US immigration judge granted him a kind of protected legal status called withholding of removal, which means that he was the subject of a deportation order but was still allowed to stay in the US, and the government can't deport him back to El Salvador because he's more likely than not to face harm there. And with that, the judge specifically cited the fact that he would likely be targeted by Salvadoran gangs if he was deported. And all of this, as it's also been reported that Abrego Garcia is married to a US citizen and has a 5-year-old disabled child who is also a US citizen, though notably it doesn't appear that he has a green card. But as far as what went down specifically, according to The Atlantic, which first broke the story, Abrego Garcia was stopped by ICE agents on the way to pick up his son from the house of the boy's grandmother on March 12th, with the agents allegedly telling him that his protected status has changed, then waited for his wife to come to the scene to take care of his child, and then drove him away in handcuffs. And within 2 days, he had been transferred to an ICE staging facility in Texas. But then, one day after that, on March 15th, him being placed on one of those 3 flights that the Trump administration used to send people to El Salvador's terrorism confinement center. Right, and this, despite concerns about due process, questionable legality, especially because most of the deportees were Venezuelan, and the fact that a judge ordered the flights to turn around or stay on the ground. And, since he was deported, Abrego Garcia's family said they've had 0 contact with him, but his wife also said that she identified him based on his tattoos and scars and news photographs of the prison released by the Salvadoran president, which notably is also the same prison that Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem did her widely criticized tour and social media blitz last week. Now, with all this, one very important thing to keep in mind here is that in addition to having protected status, Abrego Garcia has not been charged with any kind of crime. And this, despite the fact that you had JD Vance claiming on X that court documents show he was a convicted MS-13 gang member with no legal right to be here. Because as places like Axios have explained, Abrego Garcia has not been convicted of gang-related crimes. He was just accused of it in court. Right? And while Vance didn't link to the evidence that he was talking about, the documents he at least appears to be referring to are court filings from Trump administration lawyers. And there, you have the lawyers alleging that during Abrego Garcia's 2019 deportation proceedings, an informant told ICE that he was a member of the gang MS-13, arguing that a judge denied him bonds because the evidence shows that he is a verified member of MS-13 and he did not present evidence to rebut those claims. But with that, Simon Sandoval-Moschenberg, a lawyer for Abrego Garcia, firmly denied the accusations, saying the only basis of his gang membership was a confidential informant, and adding, in court filings, the US government has never produced an iota of evidence to support this unfounded accusation, with the lawyer also telling The Atlantic that the allegations against Abrego Garcia stem from an incident in 2019 where he and 3 others were detained by police in a Maryland Home Depot parking lot. And during questioning there, one man told the officers that Abrego Garcia was a gang member, but then that man offered no proof, and police filings show that the officers didn't actually even believe him and refused to identify him as a gang member, with the attorney then adding that since Abrego Garcia was granted his withholding of removal in 2019, he has had no contact with any law enforcement agency and has complied with the requirements to check in annually with ICE. And when White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked this afternoon what evidence Vance had for his claims that Abrego Garcia had been convicted, she just said that the government had, quote, a lot of evidence and that she herself saw it this morning. And notably, she also didn't provide any information about what the evidence was or why it hadn't been presented in the court. But also, regardless of the gang tie allegation, Sandoval-Moschenberg argues that this deportation is flatly illegal because no matter how you feel about it, a judge explicitly protected Abrego Garcia from being deported. But if the government wants to deport someone with protected status, they usually have to reopen the case and introduce new evidence for deportation, which a very key thing is why you even have government attorneys telling The Atlantic that they are stunned by this case, with Sandoval-Moschenberg also telling the outlet that he believes that Trump officials deported his client, quote, through extrajudicial means because they believed that going through the immigration judge process took too long and they feared that they might not win all of their cases, with him adding that he's never seen a case where the government knowingly deported someone who had received protected legal status from an immigration judge. Right to that point, Trump's lawyers aren't even trying to hide the fact that they knew he had protected status. In their court filings, they explicitly wrote, ICE was aware of this grant of withholding of removal at the time of Abrego Garcia's removal from the United States. Reference was made to this status on internal forms, with the lawyers also explaining that Abrego Abrego Garcia wasn't on the initial manifest of the deportation flight, but was listed as an alternate who got moved up the list as other detainees were removed from the flight, and claiming that the flight manifest did not indicate that Abrego Garcia should not be removed, and adding, through administrative error, Abrego Garcia was removed from the United States to El Salvador. This was an oversight. But then, going on to insist that his deportation was carried out in good faith because his purported membership in MS-13, with Sandoval Maschenberg also telling the outlet that the case appears to be the first time the Trump administration has admitted to errors when it sent 3 plane loads of Salvadoran and Venezuelan deportees to the Salvadoran prison. Right, and this, as we've talked about before, attorneys for some of those people have accused the Trump administration of falsely labeling their clients as gang members because of their tattoos that have nothing to do with gangs. But there, Trump officials have disputed those claims amid widespread concerns about violations of due process. Now, with that said, as far as what happens next with Abrego Garcia's case, lawyers representing him and his family have asked the court to order the Trump administration to ask for his return, and that, even if it means withholding payment to the Salvadoran government, which has claimed it's getting $6 million annually to jail U.S. deportees. But then, on the other side, you have the Trump administration asking the court to dismiss those requests on multiple grounds, arguing that Trump's primacy in foreign affairs outweighs the interests of Abrego Garcia and his family. And this, as I mentioned earlier, claiming that U.S. courts don't have the jurisdiction to order his release. But notably, Sandoval Maschenberg has hit back against that last argument, telling The Atlantic, if that's true, the immigration laws are meaningless, all of them, because the government can deport whoever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, and no court can do anything about it once it's done. And so for now, we're largely gonna have to just wait to see how this plays out, though in the meantime, unsurprisingly, the whole situation has sparked a ton of backlash. And in fact, we're seeing Trump's broader deportation tactics being so controversial that you have some unlikely voices condemning them. With this, even including the likes of Joe Rogan, who of course famously endorsed Trump, or with Rogan talking about these efforts on his podcast this weekend with political commentator Konstantin Kisin. And while Rogan did praise Trump for lowering the number of illegal migrant crossings at the border, we also saw this.
The thing is, like, you got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting, like, lassoed up and deported and sent to, like, El Salvador prisons.
When you do things quickly and you do things aggressively, that's how you get shit done. But that's also when mistakes get made.
Right.
And I think a human being being plucked out of nowhere and ending up in a country he's never been in a maximum security prison with gang members, seems like a bad thing to happen to me.
It's horrific. It's horrific.
But yeah, that is ultimately where we are right now with this one. We're gonna have to keep our eyes on it. There's seemingly constant developments, but in the meantime, I gotta ask you, what are your thoughts here? Because for those that are new here, yes, this is a news show, but I also want it to be a conversation. But then from that, next up, some quick but big news. The Trump Justice Department wants Luigi Mangione dead. Or with us seeing just this morning, Attorney General Pam Bondi directing federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty for Mangione. Right in this, as we all know the story, he's accused of shooting and killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, with Bondi calling Thompson's killing a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America, and notably citing President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again. Right in this, notably following the first day of his second term, where Trump signs an order directing the AG to pursue the death penalty for all crimes of severity, demanding its use. And that after Biden put a moratorium on it back in 2021. And while yes, this is big news, it's also been expected. But also the key thing here is it could take a minute before any part of this story actually plays out. Because in addition to the federal charges, he's also facing state charges in New York and Pennsylvania. And we've seen prosecutors on both sides saying they're okay with letting the New York case play out first. And notably there, New York doesn't have the death penalty, so he's facing up to life without parole. So a big update, an expected update, and we're gonna be seeing more soon. And then I've got more news you need to know in just a moment. But first, parenting is a non-stop marathon with chasing soccer balls through mud, racing to games, and pivoting to dinner plans, all while staying incredibly present. The struggle is real even when the life is good. And that is why Vessi's weekend sneakers are my go-to for whatever life throws at me. Make the struggle less by choosing today's sponsor, Vessi. They offer shoes and apparel designed for you not to worry about weather. Their sneakers, like all their products, they're built for real life. Like when I'm at my kid's game and it's sunny one minute and the next it's a storm rolling in. Or when you're chasing your dog through wet grass or just enjoying a hike without worrying about the weather or terrain. Vessi handles it all from sand to snow and everything in between. They have seamlessly blended style and function, right? These shoes have the look of stylish footwear, but they're designed like rain boots, perfect for everything from jeans to gym shorts. In comfort, it's like wearing a sock. Whether it's daily walks, weekend hikes, or just looking put together in any weather, they have you covered head to toe. So start saying yes more without worrying about the weather. Vessi has you covered with waterproof protection, comfort, and readiness for anything. Just scan the QR code or go to vessi.com/DeFranco and get an automatic 15% off your first order at checkout. That's vessi.com/DeFranco. get them now. But then next up from that, we gotta talk about the political, social media, and business news of the TikTok ban deadline approaching again. Because even though January feels like a million years ago at this point, it was just over 70 days ago that TikTok went dark for around 12 hours, with Trump then signing an executive order to delay the ban by, well, 75 days. Which, to save you pulling out a calendar, that means that the extension is up on Saturday, April 5th. So yet again, the future of the app is up in the air because the law requires that the app's owners, ByteDance, divest from the company or get the boot in the United States, and right now, it's unclear who would actually take over. Though with that, Trump told reporters on Air Force One this week that he expects a deal to be made before Saturday.
There's tremendous interest in TikTok. The decision is going to be my decision, as you know, through Congress. They've given me the power to make the decision. We have a great team of people essentially taking bids. I'd like to see TikTok remain alive.
If no deal, will you extend the deadline?
Well, there'll be a deal with TikTok. I'm pretty sure.
So nothing too specific from him, and in fact, that's been kind of what he's been saying for roughly the last month when asked about the matter.
But we have a lot of interest in TikTok. We're dealing with 4 different groups. And a lot of people want it, and it's up to me.
But, even though we haven't gotten a ton of concrete answers from him, there has been a ton of reporting over the past few months on the many names and groups putting their hat in the ring. As you might remember, both Microsoft and Oracle have been mentioned as interested, as has billionaire Frank McCourt. It's also been reported that Mr. Beast is part of a bid being led by entrepreneur Jesse Tinsley. And Trump, he's even floated the idea of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund buying TikTok. And then, over the weekend, the New York Times also reported that the private equity group Blackstone is considering taking a small stake in TikTok, with the Times there adding, Trump has been repeatedly approached by parties pitching him ideas, and his interest in different arrangements can be fleeting. Though also, according to the outlet, right now, one of the most likely deals is that the existing US investors in ByteDance just roll their new stakes to a new independent global TikTok company. Additionally, we've seen other reports saying that Oracle is in fact the front runner, but there could be some legal issues there. For example, Politico reporting that one deal being discussed in the White House would involve Oracle running TikTok, but saving a role for ByteDance. And that, even though the law requires ByteDance to give up control of the company and algorithm, retaining at most a 20% financial stake in TikTok. And so even though some in Washington, they're trying to fight against any deal that includes carve-outs for ByteDance, Politico is reporting that there may be little anyone can actually do to prevent this deal, even if it does go against the law. But then with saying that, some might wonder what happens if there is no deal, right? If talks with whoever falls through and by Saturday, nothing's on the books. And well, even though Trump has insisted that it will not be necessary, he has previously said that he is willing to extend the deadline yet again. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing if we end up meeting up same place, same time again, like in July. Additionally, he's suggested that he has a few tricks up his sleeve, like cutting some tariffs on China to get a deal through. Also, something that's interesting with the situation is you might have noticed that people on the app seem a lot less nervous about the potential of a ban, which, is a standout thing, because last time in the week leading up to the ban, everyone was in full-blown panic mode. But largely, this time around, at least so far, it's mostly business as usual on the app. With us even seeing CNBC doing a report talking to creators who say they're just less nervous about it, right? Some saying that they just don't feel like the app is actually going to get banned, and others noting that they've had the time to diversify their platforms and reach. And so for now, we're just kind of having to wait to see how things play out into the weekend. But then, next up today, y'all, we got to talk about how he may be done by the time that you're seeing this, but as of right now, Cory Booker is still going on and on and on and on. What I mean, if you haven't seen, is that the Democratic senator from New Jersey decided to attempt a marathon speech on the Senate floor in protest of Trump. Right, and so at 7 p.m. on Monday night, he began speaking and vowed to continue as long as I am physically able, with him quoting the late civil rights icon John Lewis before undertaking his own journey.
He said, "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble. Help redeem the soul of America." And so I start tonight thinking about him. I've been thinking about him a lot during these last 71 days. Get in good trouble, necessary trouble, help redeem the soul of America, and had to ask myself, if he's my hero, how am I living up to his words?
Right, and with that, he was off blasting the Trump administration for everything it's done over the past few months, with him speaking virtually nonstop, right? The only time he paused were to take questions from fellow Democrats who were really just giving him a chance to catch his breath. And so as I'm recording this at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, he is still going, passing the 22-hour mark. Now with this, I'll say technically it's not a filibuster because he's not actually blocking any legislation right now. But still, what we're seeing is that it's gonna go down as one of the longest speeches in congressional history. We're with it up there with Ted Cruz's 21 hours, Chris Murphy's 15 hours, and Bernie Sanders' Speakers is 8.5 hours. Though notably, the record was set by then Senator Strom Thurmond, a South Carolina segregationist who spoke for 24 hours and 18 minutes in 1957. And so for now, we'll have to wait to see where Cory Booker is going to land in the history books, though I will also say it's been very interesting to see Democrats rallying around this. Right, in recent weeks and months, there are a lot of people who have been aligned with the Democratic Party saying that they haven't been happy with the party, with more and more people saying they want to see things like how AOC and Bernie Sanders have been going out and interacting with the people and making loud noises. And while this is obviously in a different avenue, it's not out there with the people, it's on the floor. We've seen many saying, yes, more of this. This is not normal, so don't act normal. But as far as if this is a blip or yet another spark that could lead to a fire, that remains to be seen. But then next up from that, we got to talk about Trump is handing over billions of dollars to Elon Musk, and Jon Stewart is blaming Democrats for it, at least partially. So let's start with the money, $42 billion of it, in fact, all of which is supposed to go towards the poorest Americans. Because you see, one of the things that Biden's 2021 infrastructure bill did was create a federal grant program called Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD for short, with the purpose being to hook up the estimated 22 million Americans without at-home internet to high-speed underground fiber optic cable. And for the past 4 years, states have been crawling through the regulatory obstacle course to get their hands on that money and start digging. But then, earlier this month, Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announced that BEAD was getting overhauled, with him launching what he called a rigorous review of the program, cutting out red tape, and most notably making it tech neutral. Meaning that instead of just extending fiber optic cables to homes and businesses, the program would also open up satellite internet, which in effect brings in Starlink, right? Elon Musk's satellite internet service. Right, especially because there are very few other serious providers and none of them focus on the consumer market the way that Starlink does. I mean, even Amazon's Kuiper, the closest competitor here, it's just launching its first batch of satellites this year, and the full constellation, that'll be less than half the size of Starlink. Now with this, you have the White House arguing that the move will get broadband to people more quickly and for less money. But also, as basically every expert has pointed out, fiber optic is cheaper, faster, and generally more stable than satellite internet. Because while satellite is definitely cheaper to set up initially, it's arguably more expensive in the long run. With Starlink service that's comparable to high-speed fiber, costing some $120 a month, whereas fiber itself, it costs around $80 on average. And so with that, you have people like Drew Garner with the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society explaining to NPR, satellite internet is like a dirt road. Fiber internet is like a highway. You can build a few houses off a dirt road, but you can build hospitals, schools, businesses, and entire cities off a highway. And so as the metaphor suggests, satellite service works well for remote locations that have no other option, but the whole point of this grant program was to give those areas another better option. And this is, you have critics saying that what makes this whole situation even more ironic is that Republicans have criticized Biden's infrastructure plans, be it charging stations or broadband networks, for being too slow. And now we're seeing critics fear that Trump's rigorous review of BEAD, that it's going to slow it down even more. With, for example, Evan Feinman, who ran BEAD until earlier this month, telling NPR, I'm sympathetic to the argument that the program should have gone faster. But the program went too slowly does not lead logically to we should then slow the program down more so we can provide worse connections at a higher end user cost. Saying West Virginia was ahead of schedule, under budget, and ready to provide excellent connections for every West Virginian home and business. How can anyone go back and say, let's go back to the drawing board? And adding, it's hard to identify any sensible case for upending these plans based on the technology or the economics, which is then why we've seen so many seeing this as a transparently corrupt way to further enrich Elon Musk with taxpayer dollars. Now with that, you have Republicans countering, saying they're not the ones putting the thumb on the scale, saying they're just making the program tech neutral, with them then pointing the finger back at Democrats for, or as they claim, deliberately excluding Starlink from consideration for political reasons, as well as generally tying up the whole program in red tape, with Ariel Roth, Trump's pick to lead the telecommunications agency, saying that BEAD was the victim of a woke social agenda. With that, apparently referring to provisions that encourage states to select companies with racially diverse workforces or unionized firms. And actually, during Roth's Senate confirmation hearing last week, Ted Cruz made essentially the same point.
To date, BEAD has not connected even a single American to high-speed internet service. This is the result of prioritizing partisan requirements like, quote, climate resiliency and rate regulation over actually connecting those who are offline.
Now, notably with this, you have some like Feinman, the program's former head, arguing that Republicans can actually get rid of those bureaucratic requirements without disrupting the contract, with him telling the Washington Post that Louisiana, Nevada, and Delaware, they have already finalized their plans under BEAD. And so instead of making them reconsider their plans to include Starlink, the White House could just strip away the woke stuff and let the process go ahead and take the win that Biden gave them. And all of this is, keep in mind, it's not just the Republicans who want to simplify regulation. I don't know how involved you are in the space, but you may have have noticed that liberal commentator Ezra Klein has made the rounds recently to promote his book, and he's argued that Democrats have fucked themselves over by putting process before results. And in fact, just a few days ago, he made this claim specifically about Bede while talking to Jon Stewart, with him laying out the regulatory steps, and you can almost see Stewart's eyes popping further and further out of his skull.
We have to issue the notice of funding opportunity within 180 days. That's step one. Step two is states who want to participate must submit a letter of intent. After they do that, they can submit a request for up to $5 million in planning grants. Then the NTIA, step four, has to review and approve and award, again, planning grants. States must submit a 5-year action plan. So the states kind of go back and they kind of think about how they're going to do this. Then the FCC must publish the broadband data maps. And then, of course, the states need an opportunity to challenge the map for accuracy. So then the NTIA, step 7, has to use the FCC maps to make allocation decisions. Step 8 is states must submit an initial proposal. Step 9, NTIA must review and approve each state's, again, initial proposal. Step 10, states must publish their own map and allow internal challenges to their own map. Step 11, the NTIA must review and improve the challenge results and the final map. Step 12, states must run a competitive sub-granting process.
Oh my fucking God.
Step 13, states must submit a final proposal. Step 14, the NTIA must review and approve the state's final proposal.
I'm speechless, Ezra. Honestly, like, it's far worse than I could have imagined. But the fact that they amputated their own legs on this is what's so stunning.
Right, and a lot of what gets hit on there is the how something is done. Right, with part of the idea being having a great policy is great, but then if you make the process complicated and cumbersome and just so slow, not only do you potentially screw your own projects, you don't get to showcase them next to yourself. You know how many times covering this space I've seen Congress people going like, hey, look at this great thing that I did, and you're like, you didn't do that. In fact, in some scenarios, it's Congress people who voted against that, but it's been years since, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, look, I'm taking credit. Which I will say, it also boggles my mind because it feels like that's common sense, especially in a political landscape that can change so dramatically every 2 to 4 years, or whether it be the ever-changing Congress every 2 years, or who's in the White House every 4. Right, every change or build, it's not gonna be able to fit in that timeline, but there's probably so many things that could. But hey, that's a situation, a little my opinion, and of course we've heard a few different perspectives, but now I'll throw it to you. I'd love to know your thoughts. And then I've got some more news for you in just a moment, but first, watching my wife with our boys, there are 2 words that always come to mind. Superhuman. Or between juggling calls, running the household, and somehow checking in on me every day, she deserves something that gives her a moment of peace. With Mother's Day on the horizon, today's sponsor, Raycon, and their everyday earbuds, they make a thoughtful gift for the superhuman in your life. First up, the battery life's insane with 32 hours of nonstop sound. Moms can cruise through podcasts for an entire work week without charging. The multi-point connectivity also helps her jump between her work laptop and phone without the awkward Bluetooth shuffle. The real gift, though, the noise cancellation's next level. So whether she's blocking out the kids gaming or me gaming or just trying to find zen during her workout, Raycon has her covered. And all of this is they're budget friendly, starting at half the price of those bougie brands. And all of this is, y'all know I've used mine for years with hiking, walking the dog, or even just doing the dishes. With the ergonomic design ensuring that they stay in your ears, unlike others that I've tried. Plus, the protective cases, they're low-key aesthetic with wireless charging, cool design, it fits perfectly in my tech bag. They're amazing, and the best part is you can try them risk-free with a 30-day happiness guarantee. So for the superhuman in your life, or just for you, head to buyraycon.com/DeFranco to get up to 20% off site-wide. But then, next up from that, the tariff situation, the cost of goods situation may be about to get crazy. And that because in about 24 hours, we're gonna be finding out just how big of a trade war the world is gonna be in. We know that 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, as well as a 25% tariff on all auto imports start tomorrow, or are supposed to. But that also, it might just be the tip of the iceberg because President Donald Trump is reportedly going to announce another wave of tariffs on just about everyone and everything in what he's been calling Liberation Day. Now with that, the exact details are unclear, with the president just teasing that the tariffs would be nicer than what American goods face in other markets, saying we are going to be very nice by comparison to what they were. The numbers will be lower than what they have been charging us, and in some cases may be substantially low. And this is sources within the White House have told outlets various things, with some saying that the administration is looking to implement reciprocal tariffs in order to balance out the tariffs that other countries place on US goods. With one example that the president has harped on for weeks now is the alleged 200 to 300% tariffs that American dairy products face in Canada. Though there, as Canadians have pointed pointed out, that number is missing a bunch of context. Right? In that example, allegedly 99.9% of American dairy products are actually exempt from the tariff since it only applies once a certain threshold is met. And actually, many tariffs around the world, they have similar carve-outs and exceptions, but what we're seeing is the president seeming to just say the big number and claim that that's what we're going to match. Though this is, other advisors are reportedly pushing a different approach. Right? Instead, they want to implement a flat tariff of 15 to 25% on essentially every good entering the US. And this, as Trump has also said, that some industries like automobiles could also be slapped with additional tariffs. And with all of this, they claim that it'll raise upwards of $6 trillion in revenue. You know, with that saying, the money can be used for a variety of things. Obviously, balancing the budget is a top priority for Republicans, at least on paper. But also, other options that have been floated around include some kind of tax rebate or payout to Americans. But what I'll add here is, while that sounds great, right? You're gonna give me money? Love that. Any sort of rebate like that, if it even happens, would likely not even be close to the crazy amount extra that Americans would have to pay for nearly everything if such a tariff were to go into effect. And in fact, we're seeing experts saying, and it's kind of a grand irony, this would mean that Republicans would be responsible for the largest tax hike ever in US history. And understand, we do not know fully how this is gonna play out, the scale of things, right? In any tariffs, they are going to trigger a trade war, but experts are warning that a flat 20%, that would be disastrous. With, for example, seeing an economics professor at Harvard who wrote a popular economist textbook blasting any of these plans, with him pointing out that low tariffs and open global trade, it's one of the few things that economists agree on. With him even adding, Trump doesn't seem to understand basic international economics. A lot of the arguments he makes, Adam Smith was refuting 2.5 centuries ago in Wealth of Nations, and adding, I have not seen a more wrong-headed policy come out of a White House in decades. And this is the chief economist for Moody's, a major financial outlook company, said that a flat tariff, it would almost immediately put the US economy into a recession and that stocks would lose 1/4 their value by 2027, with them then also fearing that unemployment will dramatically rise. And notably, Moody's is hardly the only financial institution making these predictions, with essentially all of them bracing for the worst. Right? And so with all that, when we look out into the landscape of this whole situation, it's not surprising that we're seeing clear signs that investors are on edge. We're seeing stuff like gold, which is traditionally seen as a hedge during economic downturns, rising above 3,100 per ounce for the first time ever. But, with all that, the TLDR is that economists widely agree that a flat rate on everything would be a worst case scenario. But the good news, although it's only good because of the other options, is that Trump seemed to back off from the flat rate approach yesterday, telling reporters whatever they charge us, we'll charge them. Though reportedly, many administration officials don't like this approach because it'll incentivize companies to instead move products to a third country before importing them in order to dodge the tariffs. But either way, right, these tariffs allegedly are an attempt by the administration to restructure the world's economy. The president, they have the widespread authority to do this under the 1977 International Emergency Economics Powers Act. But yeah, with all that said, hopefully you understand a bit more, and we'll have to wait to see what does or does not happen on Liberation Day. The details are all up in the air right now, but they pretty much all point to an economic downturn, according to almost every economist. But then, next up from that, we have your once daily DeFranco recommended dose of good news, and with that, I'd like you to meet Wendell and Artemis. So they're service dogs that were trained by inmates in the San Quentin State Prison. And this because back in 2023, San Quentin introduced a puppy training program run by Canine Companions, which is a nonprofit based in Santa Rosa. And they bring in these puppies between 2 and 4 months old that are then placed with inmates within San Quentin for training. Right? And the dogs stay with the inmates until they're roughly 16 months old, and during that time, the inmates are responsible for teaching the dogs about 20 foundational commands and skills, as well as just caring for them. But then, every few months during that time, the dogs are taken out into the world for socialization experiences like interacting with children, riding in cars, or going to the grocery store. And then, after that, the dogs go to professional trainers for several more months before they are then given to people with disabilities as service animals. Also, before any of you start panicking about the safety of the dogs, only inmates in the earned living units, which is where they're allowed to participate in a wide variety of self-help programs, are allowed to apply. And notably, only those without a history of animal or child abuse or cruelty are allowed to participate. And so what we've seen with this program thus far is it's been pretty successful, with James Dern, the National Director of Puppy Programs for Canine Companions, saying that dogs trained by inmates have a 10% greater success rate at becoming service dogs than other candidates. And it's actually because of the time and care that the incarcerated men put into these dogs, which is absolutely evident in Chase Benoit and Jared Henson. You see, Chase and Jared, they were part of the first round of prison puppy training at San Quentin back in 2023. They were the ones that laid the foundational training for Artemis and Wendell. And for the first time since the dogs graduated, Chase and Jared got to see them again as well as their owners, with what ended being an emotional reunion, right? You had Jared telling Wendell's new owner, he remembers me for sure, I could tell when he came in. I'm so happy that you love him and that you have a bond. And Chase telling AP News that it was amazing seeing Artemis in action and serving the community. And now what's pretty cool is that since the first round, the puppy program at San Quentin has grown to 16 trainers and 2 dog sitters who are currently training 8 puppies. And this is there are similar programs at more than 20 other prison institutions, with Dern say, being given something to care about other than themselves and the opportunity to give back and to sort of start to make amends for the things they have done in their lives can be life-changing. We saw that sentiment echoed by Chase, who said, being in this program, it's given me something that I think I've searched for my whole life. And that was meaningful purpose, doing something that's good, better, bigger than myself, and feeling like I'm part of something great. So with that, I gotta say, hats off not only to Artemis and Wendell for being exceptional service dogs, but also to Chase and Jared for doing the work to get them to that point. And then finally, Canine Companions for giving them that opportunity. But then finally today, let's talk about y'all's comments on yesterday's show and some commentary brought to you by beautifulbastard.com, where right now you can get any of this year's bestsellers for 15% off if you use code PDS15. And that's in addition to items that we have for 50% off right now, including 3 packs of our core gear. All right, so grab yourself God is Testing Me and I Refuse to Study, Clearly Thrive on a Silly Goose in This Economy, and all this goodness. And hell, that code even works with stuff that's already 50% off, like our 3-pack of core teas, our candles, and so much more. So definitely check it all out at beautifulbastard.com, links in the description. But like I said, let's talk about those comments. Right, to start off there were a lot of comments about the fluoride situation, with Game Buoy Games joking, oh no, there's fluoride in my leaded water, as well as Iron Waffle saying, fluoride bad, raw milk good in 2025. This should not be a popular opinion. Can you imagine how far ahead we could be if we had better education from preschool to graduation? And this, as we had folks in the comments claiming, as a Utahn and the son of a dental hygienist, I was stunned but not surprised at the news of the fluoride bill when it was introduced in our state's legislative session. And adding, Utah has an abundance of dental health professionals and they came together to unambiguously oppose the bill. With him also adding, it's worth noting that there is a subset of people in the state that strongly favor homeopathic medicine and are less trusting of scientifically proven treatment. The rep that introduced the bill is from Utah County, which has the stereotype reputation for these kinds of beliefs. With him then adding, when I asked my mom and her opinion on it as a dental hygienist, I got the quickest response ever from her saying, it's the dumbest thing ever. Governor Cox is a fool for several reasons, and we can add this to the ever-growing list of bad bills he has signed. I'm gonna be looking into how I can fluoridate my water at home. But then also, in addition to that, there were comments around Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and the several situations going on there. Jeshua saying, during a speech, Elon was heckled and he called the hecklers Soros's operatives or something close, while being the Soros he's criticizing. Which, yeah, you know, I will say, I'm someone that tries to take in a person for everything they are and all the things they touch. But for me personally, like, and this is an opinion, it's so weird to see the world's richest man also acting like the biggest victim in the world. And in the same movement and breaths where it appears that he is trying to actively buy an election, he's claiming that the people who are opposing him are paid operatives. Right? Now, so many things in politics often does, it brings us back to the idea of so many accusations are admissions. But then regarding Trump, a lot of the conversation had to do to him saying he is not joking about looking into a third term, with Von Kate saying, quote, he's just joking. No, he is not. He never has joked, and look where that has gotten us. With Magnus adding, never thought we'd be having a genuine can he do that conversation about a third presidential term. I'd say this administration is off the rails, but I don't think it was ever on them to begin with. And you had folks like Red chiming in saying, and you know when he isn't, quote, trolling or isn't trying to rile up the libs, they'll simply brush it off and defend a third term, saying, quote, it's not happening, and if it is, it's based actually. But then finally, I'll make a brief mention of it. There were so many Ugandans and Ugandan Americans that were pumped to see a positive story about Uganda. With the Alex saying, you've mentioned Uganda more than twice since I started watching you over 8 years ago, and it's always something negative, which never surprises me because, well, I know my country. But then adding, this being my first comment ever on the PDS, it brought a huge smile on my face seeing a positive story of the day coming from my country. Thank you very much for sharing something that wasn't even on my radar as a Ugandan native. And to that, I'll say, of course, you're welcome. Thank you for watching. And also the last thing I'll add here is, sorry there was no commentary on the Monday show. Time got really crunched yesterday. I wanted to make that 30-minute Philip DeFranco show, and then I was also at the same time working on making a presentation for today because I did my first ever career day at my boys' school. I did that this morning before starting on today's show. It was very cool. And who knows, maybe one of the kids in those classrooms are gonna go on to be a reporter, a journalist, get into politics, do something. I don't know, that was something I included in the presentation. One of the coolest things, I've been doing this now for almost 20 years, I've been seeing how the show can impact people, whether it's just something like, hey, thank you for informing me about the world and not making everything horrible while I'm eating my food, all the way to, hey, it inspired me to go into this job or this career, and this is where I'm at now. And it just made me really appreciative, but also, I can't believe, like, 10-year-old me, his head would have exploded. But that, my friends, is the end of your Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning dive into the news. But of course, remember, I've got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.